This is part 2 of a two-part interview with Hall of Famer Darren Flutie. Darren caught 972 passes for 14,359 yards and 66 touchdowns in his CFL career.
It's go time.
When I look back at that 94 team, from my vantage point, it just felt like you were almost like on a mission. This third place team, you go into Edmonton, you beat them, and then you go into the two juggernauts, and you just take them out. And then you got a third one, and you take them out.
Yeah, to look back, it's kind of crazy because we weren't supposed to win any of those games. But you really, you wouldn't understand it unless you were in that locker room every day. 'Cause those guys were good football players. That secondary was amazing. And as good as Doug and Calgary were, the defense played really well. I know they scored 30-something points, but they played well enough to keep us in the game. And we had our own talent on our team, and we knew it, but I don't think anyone else knew it. There was a fight every day of practice between the receivers and the secondary, so it wasn't always harmonious, right? We weren't holding hands all the time. But when it came to game time, we were all ready to play.
Which is what really matters. It's what you do on game day.
That's right. If you're getting paid to play, it's all about winning on game day.
95 doesn't go so well for the BC Lions.
Yeah, as great as 94 was, 95 was tough. A lot of things happened in 95 that were tough personally. And I felt like I played some of my best football, but I missed, I think, 7 games due to a hamstring. I tried to come back too quick from a hamstring injury, and I re-injured it. So I ended up with about 900 yards receiving, but I only played in 10 games. Also, my wife had to go home a lot. Her mother was sick, so Terry wasn't there, and my daughter wasn't there that much. It was just 95 was a tough year, but I did come back for the playoffs or maybe late in the season, and I played a couple pretty good games. I played a really good game against Edmonton in the playoffs, but it was one of those games that what could go wrong did go wrong. So hard to repeat as a team. And we lost to Edmonton and got bounced, so we didn't make it to the Western Final that year. So 95 was kind of tough. A lot of things happened that were tough personally. So it felt really right to leave British Columbia after the 95 season.
Was that because of 95, or just you felt your time there had run its course and now I want a new adventure?
I was confident enough by 95 that I would have played anywhere and I would have felt good. They didn't want Danny in British Columbia anymore. He had thrown 3 or 4 picks in the playoff game. And he threw a lot of interceptions that year, twice as many interceptions as he did touchdowns that year. And they kind of ran him out of British Columbia. So that kind of played into it because at that point, Danny and I were pretty close. We had 3 seasons together and 2 that we were really tight. Kind of seeing what the changes were going to be in British Columbia, and I didn't like it at all. I didn't like what the team was going to become. So when Danny said he was going to Edmonton, and Coach Lancaster had told Danny, ask Flutie if he wants to come with you. So Danny's like, what do you think? You want to go to Edmonton and then play for Coach Lancaster and play in Edmonton? I'm like, well, I want to get out of British Columbia, so yes. And we went to Edmonton together. Edmonton was great, and it's a great CFL city, but it's cold, and we had 2 young kids at that time. That was kind of tough for the family to be in Edmonton. Those were great years. I loved those teammates. I loved playing for Coach Lancaster.
Now, the one thing, too, that Edmonton had, and we haven't gotten into this, they were the last of the grass fields. What was it like playing at home on that field?
I loved it. It slowed everyone down to my speed. What's not to like about that? When it did get cold, it would be really cold early, and then if sun came out and warmed the top half inch, you'd be skating around on a skating rink. And I think we had a little bit of that in our playoff game that year. So that's 96. 96, 97, we had such great teams in Edmonton. The fact that we didn't win a Grey Cup in 96 or 97, we went to the Grey Cup in 96, right? I had the snow bowl, whatever they want to call it, against Doug's team. And yeah, that's a tough one for me to talk about. But I did have another good year. Danny had a really good year. And as a team, we were so good, but we lost that Grey Cup game to Toronto, and that was a tough one to take.
And then 97, of course, you lose to the upstart Rough Riders.
97 was even a better team for us. So we got the bye, right? Because we had such a great season. We rolled that year. And Saskatchewan comes in and beats us in Edmonton. It's almost like at the end of the game, you look around and you're like, what the F just happened? It's like the game went by so quickly. Mayfield had these long catches or returns. We moved the ball so well, like they couldn't stop us, but we didn't finish every drive. It was just a nightmare to hear after that game, Saskatchewan players in our locker room, like, get out of the locker room quick, because that's going to be us, because the Grey Cup was in Edmonton that year. But of course, Saskatchewan went in there and just got spanked by Toronto and Doug's team, where we had played Toronto so well that year that we were really confident. Who knows? Maybe we overlooked Saskatchewan that year. That's one of those tough losses that you look back and like, how did that happen?
Ron Lancaster then heads off to Hamilton, and who's in tow?
Yeah, so again, I'm having a conversation with Danny after the season, and we're just talking. I'm thinking I'm going to go to another team, because I knew as a family we weren't really loving living in Edmonton. It was cold and the kids were young, and that was just tough. And we wanted to work our way back east a little bit, but I wasn't thinking like package deal, Danny, and I didn't think Coach Lancaster was going to leave Edmonton. He was a great coach. But again, Danny comes up to me and he says, Wood, that was my nickname. Wood, how would you like Hamilton? I'm like, what are you talking about? Why would we go to Hamilton? They were like 2-16. You want to go to Hamilton now? But I did like the fact that Hamilton was back east, closer to Boston, closer to where we live, close to Toronto, close to getting into the States near Niagara Falls, and close to Toronto. It was a good place. And actually, both Danny and I did know that Hamilton, they had a great defensive football team. Even though they went 2-16, defensively, they were always tough. I mean, if you scored 20 points on them, you had a great game. So I was kind of thinking like, Danny at quarterback, if I could go and play well. They had a good running back, and they had a couple good receivers. They just couldn't find a quarterback. So with Danny at quarterback and me coming with them, we thought we could do something. And I remember being at a press conference in 96 when we signed. And they would interview Coach Lancaster, and he's, we'll need a couple years to turn it around. And Danny said the same thing, being very politically correct, saying the right things. Well, it'll take some time, but maybe in a couple years we can turn around. But in the CFL, you make a change like that at quarterback, you get a guy like Danny McManus and a player here or there. And we had great defensive players. Gerald Vaughn was in that secondary. So good. I answered honestly. If we didn't compete for the Grey Cup, I would be really shocked, because I knew that team was good. And we got there, but we couldn't finish it.
It was a great game in Winnipeg against, again, your old nemesis, the Calgary Stampeders.
Yeah. I remember doing an interview that week thinking, I just haven't played that well. I haven't had a lot of catches in Grey Cup games. Like 94, I had the fake field goal, but I had 2 or 3 catches. 96, we lost, and I had actually separated my clavicle in 96. 98, again, I got a little beat up early. I got hit on a swing pass, and I kept telling Danny, I wouldn't throw it to me if I was you. I can only raise one hand. But we played well. We had so many weapons, right? Archie Amerson played well, Ronnie Williams, and we had good receivers. But yeah, we came up short to Calgary. I think they got us back with a last-minute field goal, so they beat us in the Winnipeg Grey Cup. But that set up the 99 Grey Cup, which made it all worthwhile.
A game that you just had an amazing stats package along with that massive one-handed catch at the back of the end zone with a minute to go in the first half.
He finds the opening. Danny McManus puts the ball in his hands, and they're moving the football.
4 catches, 94 yards for Flutie in what appears will be his finest Grey Cup day. Remember, still looking for his first touchdown in the Grey Cup Classic. First and goal, Tiger Cats. McManus into the end zone. Touchdown! There's the touchdown for Darren Flutie.
Oh, well, thank you. Very nice of you to say. The 99 Grey Cup that week in Vancouver, I was thinking to myself, who knows if I play in another Grey Cup? I know, I'm getting up there a little bit. I don't know how many years I have left. And I had told, I think it was Mark Lee, I was like, this is, I really want to play my best football in this Grey Cup. This was one Grey Cup that I felt very healthy. I had another good year, and I was really ready to play that football game. And for some reason in that first half, Danny was just pumping it to me. Whether I was covered or not, he was throwing it to me. So I had some catches early in the game. And for a receiver, that's big, right? If you get a couple, 2 or 3 catches early in the game in the first quarter, it really gets you involved into the game and your confidence starts to grow. And that's the way that game went. So like the one-handed catch in the end zone. And that's the year that my son was really into Batman. So I did my little Batman celebration. I didn't think it was that much of a celebration, but it ended up getting a little bit of TV time. But yeah, 99 was a great team. That was a carryover of the 98 team, but it was such a more confident team. Orlando Steinhauer, Gerald Vaughn, Danny, Ronnie Williams and Archie Amerson kind of doing time at running back and slot back. We always had to get through Montreal in order to get to that game. And Montreal was tough. Again, we're back to talking about Coach Ritchie and what he would do with teams. He was a very good defensive coach. 98 was the Osbaldiston field goal, the 55-yard field goal to get us to the Grey Cup. But we lost that one. 99 was the fake field goal. I think, we went for it.
Third down gamble.
There you go, third down gamble. We went for it. Because I remember I had a post on the backside, and I kept telling Danny, Joe Higgins is a great athlete, made an incredible catch, and he got it down inside the 10 or 5.
38-yard line is where he had to get to.
What do you do? Third and short? Do you gamble? Do you go for the field goal?
Well, I think at this short, you gamble. You go ahead and get the first down. But I don't think Danny McManus has to go to the end zone in this series. He can kick a field goal, make it a 2-point game, and then hope his defense can hold, get the ball back one more time, and then it's just a field goal position is all you need. He doesn't have to go to the end zone, but I think you gamble here when you're this close.
Cats have brought in the Hogs, Mike Campbell, Bob Beveridge, Joe Higgins, Jarrett Smith, third and less than a yard. And McManus will pass deep to Joe Higgins. He's got it! What a catch by Higgins. A big first down at the 11-yard line. What a gamble.
Whoa, what a gamble by Ron Lancaster. With inches to go, they elect to throw the football, and Higgins was not open. And it was Baron Miles. 2 interceptions already, running down to catch up to Higgins. He's not
But I
open.
told Danny coming back to the huddle, I'm like, I was wide open backside on the post. But Joe had made such a great play, and that was a big gamble. And then we punched that in, and we barely got by them, but we won that football game. And then we got to the Grey Cup, and we made the best of it that year. And finally, I'd had like one of my better games in a Grey Cup, so that felt really good.
You mentioned that you didn't know if you'd ever get back to another Grey Cup. Unfortunately, you don't in your career. And ironically, the Ticats haven't won one since you've been there.
Yeah, I find that amazing. In a league with 8 or 9 teams, you'd think the Ticats would get back there. Well, I'm trying to do the math. 09, 19, 25 years, right? I just had a feeling that we wouldn't be able to sign back all those guys I was just talking about. Calvin Tiggle was in there, Joe Montford. We had Willie Whitehead was a great player. We had such great players defensively, and we lost, I think, 3 of them. 3 really big leaders. Like Tiggle was our captain, and we lost him. And we lost a couple people up front, but on defense was where we really got hurt, and we couldn't re-sign players. It was just, I don't think ownership could afford to re-sign those guys. We still did fine offensively, like 2000, 2001. We made the playoffs, and we lost games, stupid games we should have never lost. We had Winnipeg beating a playoff, and for some reason we were trying to kill the clock, but we called a reverse, and we fumbled a ball or something, and they went in and scored and beat us. That ended the 2000 playoffs. 2001, we're in Winnipeg. We dominated the whole game. We're on the 1 yard line, first and goal on the 1, and we didn't score. And that would have won that football game. That's the stuff that happens when you're not playing your best, you're not peaking at the right time, and you don't have that confidence that we had through 98 and 99. We just couldn't catch that magic again in 2000 and 2001. In 2002, my last season, I was playing it, but in my mind, I was almost done. I could feel like, I wasn't quite the same, like physically. I didn't have the same skills I had, and I knew I was coming kind of close to the end. Still a decent team, but we didn't make the playoffs in 2002, so.
And then you retire, which I guess for any professional athlete, that's got to be one of the biggest decisions and toughest decisions you ever take.
Yeah. I mean, the guys you are with in that locker room end up being almost family. You just become so close. You work so hard for the common goal that you're trying to attain. It's really tough. What I played 13 years in the CFL, and I had 3 years kind of bouncing around the NFL. So that lifestyle of being in a locker room and playing the sport that you really love was coming to an end. And I was starting a new chapter in my life. And that's tough. That's tough for any athlete, I would imagine. So yeah, that was going to be quite an adjustment.
Most don't get the choice. At least you had that opportunity.
I did, right? And I had told Coach Lancaster that I would come back up and I was going to sign for another year at least, maybe a year and an option. And as it got closer to that date, usually you feel like, all right, the excitement come back to you and you want to get back and you want to play. And I never felt that kind of desire to go back up. So I ended up calling them maybe a week before they were going to have the press conference. And I just spoke with Coach Lancaster and I just said, I think I'm done. I mean, I don't have that passion that I used to have, and I wouldn't be great for you even if I came back up. And he was so great about it. He's like, I totally get it. He goes, do you want to do a press conference and announce your retirement and do all that? And I just kind of said, I'd rather not go through all that. I just say I retire and that's that, and we move on. So that's kind of the way we did it.
How does CBC come along?
So out of the blue, trying to move on, right? I was looking for something to do and I had some options, but I was spending time at home. I was coaching my son, like in youth sports, and coaching my daughter in basketball. I was happy, and I had found a job with actually a BC alumni. I started working for a company that he worked with. And then CBC called me out of the blue, like if I wanted to come up and audition to broadcast. And I had never thought about doing that. But I did an audition with Mark Lee. And it's funny because it goes back to the 99 Grey Cup where I did that interview with him. I really liked Mark, such a nice guy. So what they did is they threw on a game. I think it was the Argonauts playing someone. And I was so fresh out of the league that I still knew all the players. So it's just like I'm talking to you right now. If we were to talk football, I mean, that is the one thing that I can actually speak halfway intelligently about. I knew what I was saying. I knew coverages very well. And I knew all the players. So I was very relaxed and very comfortable, especially that kind of interview during the game with Mark. And right after I did that, they offered me right away. They're like, oh, that was great. Will you do this?
General manager, too much. He needs to pull back, be a head coach.
Again, I respectfully disagree with Greg, and I apologize.
Why are you doing respectful?
Because I have to, because I was a little harsh on him earlier. But listen, this guy played 14 years in the league, coached 2 years down at Valdosta State. He was up with TSN in the booth, got a nice perspective of the league up there. And I just think Roy Shivers, the general manager of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, should have no comments about who is hired as head coach and GM of the Calgary Stampeders. That's for the people in Calgary to do. Hey, he's going to make some mistakes. It's his first year doing it, but give him time. He's going to be a great coach.
What's Saskatchewan's record?
Of course, that meant like flying up either Friday or Saturday, doing games, coming back on a Sunday, and that's when my kids' games usually were. So there was a lot of kind of flying back and maybe driving back overnight to make a game, or taking an overnight flight to kind of make one of the kids' games or something. The broadcasting was It was enjoyable.
Just joining us, good afternoon from Calgary. I'm Brian Williams. You're watching the CFL and CBC. Sean Millington and Greg Frere is the panel. Will be here with highlights and analysis at halftime. Our other member, Darren Flutie, well, he's up top of the stadium with Chris Cuthbert. Chris Walby has the day off, so right now let's go up to the booth. The fellas that will call the game, the aforementioned Darren Flutie and Chris Cuthbert. And
Good to have a world debut guy here. Pretty impressive stuff. But Darren, as we look at this game, I don't remember the last time there were two veteran quarterbacks with so much heat on them going into a game in late July. Even Henry Burris was challenged by his GM this week.
Yeah, that's something a little bit different when your GM comes to you in the locker room and challenges you as a player. So Henry Burris is really going to have to step it up this week. There's a few things with Henry Burris. I mean, he's got technique problems that he got bad habits along the way. He's not setting his...
But I think I did it 4 years maybe with CBC, and that was more than enough. It was fun, but again, I was away on the weekends, and that wasn't always the best thing.
One quote that I can attribute to you that I've always used since in my way of thinking about quarterbacking. There was a discussion at halftime, and you said there are quarterbacks that you win with, and there are quarterbacks that you win because of. And I thought that was brilliant.
Every now and again, I get lucky with saying something. You know, there's just leaders. I think that's so underrated. The way the players are around a quarterback, the way you feel when you're in the huddle, the confidence you have in them. I think we talked about earlier that 95 playoff game where Danny threw like 4 interceptions. Well, at one point, they wanted to pull Danny out of the game and bring in, no offense to Giulio Caravata, but they were bringing him in. They brought him in for a series. And I went right after that series, we were 2-out. I went straight to Coach Ritchie, and I'm like, Coach, Danny's got to come back in. He's like, oh, he's thrown 3 interceptions. We have 6 points. We need to make a change. I'm like, the only chance we have to win this football game is if Danny's in the game. Giulio just can't lead this team. Danny came back in, and he actually played really well. We just didn't score a lot of points. But Danny's just one of those guys. And, I mean, I think you can tell from the way Doug played throughout his career. Like, Doug's that fighter. He will do anything it takes to win. Where Danny was more a leader of men, everyone doesn't have it. They have the skills to do it, but they don't have that kind of it factor, you know, that special quality about them to lead a team, and then to also have the ability to play the position, make the reads, make the throws, and do the things you have to do to win. And yeah, you can tell if you spend enough time playing with someone, you can tell if they have it.
After CBC, what becomes of your career? Where do you move next in what you're doing?
I think by that time, I had gotten into orthopedics. A friend of mine, I know I went to elementary school with him, but he's a childhood friend from Natick, owned an orthopedic distributorship. It was actually for a company called Arthrex. And he just thought it would be a good fit because it's around Boston, and, you know, myself and Doug had kind of made a name for ourselves around Boston. So I was covering sports medicine with orthopedic surgeons and selling implants and devices to them. And it was probably the best thing I could have got into because it felt so natural. I'd go into the OR, and as long as you know what you're talking about when you get in there, and that took a little bit. The conversations with these surgeons are so natural because they're all like team doctors for some team, and they love talking sports, and they love hearing stories. And so that kind of sales end of things really worked out for me. And I'm still in orthopedics today. I'm still in the OR a lot, but I'm not as much a sales rep anymore. Now I co-run our distributorship with another guy.
When you look back at your time in the CFL, is there anything, let's say, I don't want to bring this up, but would you like to have played with Doug a few more seasons? Would that have been something that would have been nice?
Well, I definitely thought I wanted to. Like after 91, I thought I wanted to go with him to Calgary. But I was talking to Doug, and he's like, oh, Wally's not sure, you know, there's chemistry with the receivers. And I'm sure he probably didn't think I was good enough. That's how I took it. When you play at these levels, you take little things like that very personally. And that gives you kind of the edge and the motivation to prove yourself. So the best thing that ever happened to me is that I didn't reconnect with Doug. 92, and then again in 94, in training camp, the BC Lions had signed Mervyn Fernandez. So Fernandez was back. They had Ray Alexander, Matt Clark. I think Trevathan was there, and they picked up another receiver from the NFL. I think his name was, I can't even remember. Great guy, but very fast. It was all about speed. Could see them trying to replace me. I just think that kept me going. It kept me going. I had to prove myself as an individual. If I had kept following Doug on these different teams, they would have kept saying, well, yeah, he has another 1,000-yard season, but his brother's throwing to him. So I say this all the time to Doug, like the best thing that ever happened is that after 91, you went to Calgary and we never played together again. We had those 8 games together, and those were great. It was awesome. Like we had this chemistry together. Like we could just look at each other and know the adjustment to a blitz, or, I'd just run around and get open and he would find me. And that was a lot of fun. That was backyard football, like we were growing up. But we had that moment. When that was done, I really think I had to make a name for myself on my own. And so just ending up with Danny was as good as my brother during those playing days. I was very close with Danny, and we were both guys that had to prove themselves. So I think our paths kind of being parallel really worked out.
When did you get the call to the Hall of Fame? Who gave you the message, and how did that come about?
It was right at 5 years, so it must have been 2007. It was as soon as I was eligible. And I think Terry and I were at a basketball game at Natick High, maybe watching my nephew play. Sounds about right. And someone had my cell phone number, and they called me and said, oh, you've been voted into the CFL Hall of Fame. And I was a little removed from the CFL at that point. I wasn't broadcasting anymore. But I was kind of surprised that I was like, that's before Doug had even been inducted into the CFL Hall of Fame, because he wasn't eligible yet. He went back and played in the NFL. I think he retired in 2004. I retired in 2002. So I was eligible in 2007. So I went into the CFL Hall of Fame before Doug, which is a little strange. Obviously a great honor. It just didn't stop. I thought that was the ultimate honor, but going into the Hamilton Wall of Honor, that was amazing. That was a lot of fun. Reconnecting with my teammates. I think there's 25 other guys up on that wall. So you're a part of 26 people that have played for Hamilton through all these years. And for my name to be up there and my jersey to be up there, that meant a lot to me. And not only did I go up in Hamilton, but I also went up in British Columbia. As I look back, I'm proud of things like that I was able to play well enough in British Columbia, well enough in Hamilton, and then in general, well enough in the CFL to be in the CFL Hall of Fame.
I want to thank you so much, Darren, for being on the podcast. This was just so wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you. It's always great to kind of relive those moments, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Where can people find you on the socials?
I think I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, straight Darren Flutie. Every now and then I'll post a CFL highlight or something. There's a lot of football on there.
Do you follow the CFL quite a bit still?
I do. I follow every kind of CFL site I can find. There's a CFL alumni, the Tiger Cats, of course, Eskimos, and the BC Lions. I follow all them. And I follow a lot of the individual players. Funny, when you retire, all these guys you played against that you competed so hard against, you end up having so much respect for as time goes on. Milt Stegall was a great receiver towards the end of my career. But I talked to Milt Stegall a lot. I'll talk to a lot of the receivers in my day. But the defensive backs like Robert Holland and Barry Wilburn, all those guys from Calgary I was talking about, Kenton Leonard, Marvin Coleman, Gerald Vaughn. We just have a shared experience, and it becomes that brotherhood of CFL alumni. Whether I'm right or not, I always feel like playing through the 90s was maybe one of the greatest eras of the CFL. I'm sure that's because I felt like I played during that time. But I thought the players were tremendous. They're just tremendous people and tremendous football players. I'm really proud to have played in that era of the CFL.
Thanks again for doing this, Darren. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was great talking to you. Thanks, Don.
Thank you for listening to our show. Third Down Gamble is hosted on Podbean and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter at Third Down Gamble. Join us again at the Third Down Gamble podcast. Audio worth watching.
Third Down Gamble uses the expert resources provided by Canadian Football League player and game statistics for analytics, game notes, and statistics, and 3downnation.com for news, insight, and in-depth analysis. Please visit cfl.ca and 3downnation.com for the most up-to-date information on the Canadian Football League.